I think I may have a somewhat different story to tell about my spiritual and religious life than some people, because it's one that is not about engagement and discovery, but about leaving and falling away. So I think that it's only in the past few years I've been seeing that more and more as a spiritual story in and of itself. They broadly classify my background as evangelical Christian. And, when I was the age of many of my students, I didn't believe in evolution. I would have probably believed in some kind of worldwide flood, and believed that the Bible was inerrant. It was really during my college years, when I went to a Bible college up in Canada, a tiny place, that I was reading on my own and kind of discovered that the stories that I had grown up with and accepted in many ways, I didn't agree with. And that became led to a few years of real in and out doubt, even while I was in seminary. So I went to a Bible college, then I went to seminary. I was always struggling with, is there a place where I could fit in, a way that I could kind of settle myself into some kind of halfway position. But eventually I just decided, I actually don't believe, and I'm going to kind of step out of this. And then when I went to get my PhD, I went to a school that had no active religious affiliation and never looked back after that. But that was several years of real struggle trying to figure out where I was going to land and what I was going to be. I don't want to make too direct of a comparison, but as I've listened to people in the LGBT community talk about coming out to their parents and loved ones about their identity, that often resonates with me, because that's a lot what it felt like, that I was kind of going through these doubts and kind of undercover about them in a lot of ways. And I didn't want to, I really couldn't speak about it, because for my parents that would mean leaving the faith, would mean imagining me going to hell in the afterlife. And that was something that would cause them a lot of pain. I remember talking to a friend that I'd grown up with in the church, and talking to him about the fact that I don't believe this. And his first thing was, well, I hope you don't tell your dad about this. And I was like, why? And he said, because it would hurt him too much, and you probably just shouldn't say anything. And I had this kind of inner revulsion from that, because I thought, no, I want to be known as a person, and it felt dishonest and really cheating out my parents also to pretend or to not be fully myself. And so eventually that led to saying what I felt and where I was in my faith journey to them. And they still don't fully believe. They think I'm going to come back to the church at the end, but that I know that was the right move. And even as it caused pain, and that's again where I kind of resonate with these stories of people coming out about their sexuality, is I know it means a lot to be yourself and be able to speak from who you are. I should mention too that my dad's a pastor, an evangelical pastor. They're not just church goers, but they are kind of lifelong committed people leading small churches. It was a tiny, unaccredited Bible college, which I'm sometimes embarrassed to talk about when I get in, I'm a freshman studies lecturer, and they say, Martyn Smith, who went to Prairie Bible College. And I'm like, oh, this gives the wrong impression of who I am, because it doesn't really, but that's where I started from. And I was going to be a pastor like my dad. Then from there, I realized I can't do that, but what else can I do? And I really loved this literature and the New Testament. I'd learned Greek, and so I wanted to continue. So I went to Fuller Seminary, and my doubts continued. And at that point, when I was in seminary, is when I left, in my head at least, the church. And then I went on to a comparative literature program in Emory, where I thought, I don't have to study this stuff as theology. I can just study a lot of these texts as literature and as interesting texts in and of themselves. And at that point, I don't really want to study what I had grown up in. So I wanted to do something different. I was attracted to, Islam was another scriptural tradition with all kinds of commentary and things that I really couldn't get my hands on or understand. So I started doing Arabic, and then that just one thing led to another, and I started doing Islam. And 9/11, so I got into seminary in 1999, started doing Arabic, and then 9/11 happened when I was a couple years in, and all of a sudden I looked like a genius, because here I am. No, everyone was kind of, well, that's kind of an odd choice to do Arabic and Islam with your background, but then it's like the pieces locked into place, and it looked like a good move. And there was a lot of funding for study abroad, so I just sort of rode that, basically. When I encounter students who may have a little bit of hesitance in going in certain directions, I really do, in my head, say, I didn't believe in evolution when I was this person's age, right? And I believed in the literal, scriptures, and so it gives me, I don't know if patience is the right word, but a broader sense of where people could be coming from, and how sometimes people just have to work through at their own pace, whatever context they find themselves in. And I hope that builds empathy in myself for where people are coming from, and how slowly change can happen. There have been occasions when I talk to people and I think, well, I don't think what I said made a lot of sense to where they are, but I also know that people told me things, and then 5 years later, I looked back and I thought, yeah, I get it now. I see what that person was saying. But I also think that there's a strand of individualism in American life. Like, we can all choose our own religion. So to me, none often sounds like I'm my own self. And this scholar talks, Robert Bellah talks about Sheilaism, and the idea that everybody has their own personal, individual way of eclectically building up themselves. And I'm not comfortable with that either. I think there's a good thing in engaging with traditions that are common for large numbers of people. And I want to find, when I read the Sufis in Islam, when I read various strands of Christianity, I do feel connections and maybe I can draw some connection between this kind of lifeism that I'm sort of playing around with and these deep traditions. And so I would want to avoid none in the implication that I can somehow just construct out of nothing my own view. And I'm very interested in tying things back to these earlier traditions. And to me, there's a grandeur in that scientific and embrace of life and being on this planet. And I see that as being different. Different from what the main point of what the new atheists are saying. So I would separate myself from that, but also say I don't believe in God, but I'm not going to get a little fish with feet on it to put on the back of my car either, right? So I don't have a real symbol, and I think that's something that maybe that religions provide is our symbols and social setting. I don't know if I really have that as yet, but I think there should be something like that for people who embrace and engage with life and seek to not just seek to build connections and meaning and value in this world, which I think we can do as liberals and non-believers. I'm much more comfortable with non-believer than atheist. I don't have a word for what I am, and I wouldn't say atheist because I would want a positive word for myself. Maybe a lifeist or something like that, or just occurred to me just this moment. My ability to imagine the world, the way the world looks for people who grow up in religious situations, religious context, stems from that past. So I feel like I've kind of crossed some boundaries there, and that gives me an ability to think about it. And today, thinking about some of the divides in our country, that's part of why I really wanted to talk about this after, this is something, like I said, with a Prairie Bible College background, I sort of downplay this side of me sometimes, but I think I want to be more vocal about kind of where I come from and help people to imagine the way the world can look from different religious vantage points, which is, I think, ultimately what religious studies, to me, that's what religious studies is about, helping people to imagine the way the world looks for people that are wearing just very different glasses, different value systems, different ways of thinking about authority and truth. If you can, in your imagination, put those glasses on and see the world a little bit differently, that's religious studies to me.